Hello, this is Claire Strawn for Writers Victoria. So the question is about the challenge of finding the time to write. I think it's an extremely difficult thing to do, especially if you have family or friends who rely on you, or both, especially if you're working, and especially if you're working with words. So during the semester of teaching, for example, I spent a lot of time reading uncorrected manuscripts or sections thereof. And so it's important to also read edited work and published work as well. So it's a lot of reading time. But the more I read, the more I want to write. So that forces me to then carve time out. And it really is about carving it out. No one's going to give it to you, especially if you're not published yet. Oh, but even if you are, people don't really understand the time that it takes to enter into the deep thought necessary to get something on the page. So you have to kind of really make that time and take that time, because, no one's going to give it to you. But if they do, if you do get a retreat of some kind or a fellowship of some kind or a hot desk or any of the other opportunities that are out there, you must take it. So what great essays, short stories, novels, poems do I recommend people read to learn more about craft? Well, read all sorts of things. I guess I don't know about great essays, short stories, novels, or poems. I mean, it's so subjective what greatness is. I think if you're wanting to publish in contemporary Australia, then reading what's being published at the moment is a really good idea. I think subscribing to our literary magazines and reading what's in them is a really good idea. I think reading the classics is a really good idea. I think reading books that you are recommended by people that you trust is a really good idea. I like Ursula Le Guin's Steering the Craft of Story, and I also like Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. There's Mark Tredinnick's The Little Red Writing Book. I mean, keeping your eye out for writing about writing that interests you is kind of intuitive, I think. I'm not sure that was a very good answer, but there you go. That's what you've got. Any of Le Guin's essays? What's the best writing advice that you've received that's helped me as a writer? The late, great Olga Lorenzo once said to me, when I was sort of writhing in my seat as a student of hers, about some feedback, some constructive feedback and criticism that I'd received about my writing, that I was asking the wrong question. So when I of course wanted to know what she meant by that, and she said that when I received the feedback about a piece of writing, my question was, am I a writer? So it just went straight to my self-doubt. Am I a writer? Who cares what I write? I'm not as good as I thought I was, or whatever it is that self-doubting voice has got to say. But the question is, am I a writer? And she suggested that that's not a helpful question. And the question when you get feedback on your writing is, what do I do next? So how do I address whatever the issue is? And I think that was probably the single most important piece of feedback I've ever received, and I apply it to many things. I also love the feedback from Sybil Kempson, the American playwright Sybil Kempson, who I was lucky enough to have as one of my teachers at one point. she she wanted to kind of break me free from the idea that everything I did had to be well made, and if it wasn't well made, that it didn't have value. So, in the drafting process, in the creating process, she invited me to write. Uh, at that time, I was writing a play, and she invited me to write the worst play ever written at the top of my manuscript. And whenever I had doubt, I could just look at that and think, "Oh well, it's the worst play that was ever written." So, you know, on I go, because it can't be any worse, and it because it is the worst play ever written. And then that actually freed me up to include many things, many ideas, to not self-censor, to sort of be a lot freer with my um, scope, a lot wider with the scope of what I was doing. And then eventually, because I do like a well-made thing, I could come back and shape that, but it meant it was more dynamic, and it was a lot more fun to do. So I think about that whenever I'm working on something new, um, that I just kind of approach it. Well, what if it was the worst thing ever written? And my expectations of myself are very, very low. Um, what would I write? And it just does tend to open up the floodgates. I'd say there was another wise piece of writing advice, which was from Marcus Zuzak in our classroom at PWE a long time ago. He came in just to visit one of the teachers, and she convinced him to come and talk to us. And that was it was about the gold, and that the problem of a manuscript or a story can often be where the gold is. So you have to, if there's a problem, rather than just throwing it out and sort of editing by committee, with if people, several people have told you that it's not quite working there, if you're really committed to what you're trying to do, then you have to dig for that gold. And when you make that thing that's not working well work, then that is your very individual stamp that you're putting on your manuscript or on your work. So I thought that was excellent advice. But since then, having now been a teacher for 10 years and read a lot of uncorrected manuscripts, I think only the writer can know when to stop digging in the gold mine. And often it's about putting it in the drawer. So that old chestnut about putting it in the drawer is also important. Because the thing that you were so attached to and seemed so golden and shiny, sometimes when you get it out of the drawer a few weeks or a few months or even a few years later, you go, oh, okay, I see why that was a problem, and it's not so heart-wrenching to sort of deal with it, or you realize that it's a darling that you can let go of. The other best advice, and maybe the best advice of all, was from Jodie Webster at Allen and Unwin, who came to speak to my students, and they asked, what's your number one tip about getting published? And she said, you have to finish the draft. That there is no greater step that you need to take in order to be published than to finish the story or the draft of the story. So, what advice would I give to writers who want to write micro and flash fiction? Read a lot of it. There's plenty on the internet. You're more likely to find it on the internet than in books necessarily. But also give yourself permission to put constraints on yourself. So say I'm going to write a story in just 3 minutes and see what comes out, and also to think about jotting down lists of things that interest you, and then just choosing something off the list and making that the title and going from there. I think it's really about micro and flash, even though they're crafted, and they're always best when they're crafted. I think they can be also just delightful fun to do. So write many of them often would be my main advice. How has Writers Victoria helped me as a writer? I think when you come out of say a writing program, or you've got a writing group, and you've got your manuscript to the place that it can get to by yourself, or your story. You need once you've got your story as polished as you can by yourself, you really need support. And writing is a lonely business, and I think Writers Victoria has just been a remarkable institution for the support that it gives to emerging writers, and community, and the events. So it gave me a platform as a freelance editor, because I did manuscript assessment for Writers